What's up guys, today I'm super excited to bring you a character guide for one of my new favorite characters, Yoimiya. Luckily, miHoYo released her character quest early, so I've been able to play around with Yoimiya in her trial and really get a feel for her playstyle and her best options / gear. I know there's been some buzz about Yoimiya's current state in Genshin Impact, but today I'm not going to dissuade you nor persuade you to pull for Yoimiya. Longtime viewers of my channel will know that my philosophy has always been that you should play and pull for the characters that you enjoy the most because having fun is the most important thing about playing a game. With that being said, you're probably here to bring out the best of Yoimiya's potential if you did happen to pull her. So, just like my other guide videos, I'll cover her best artifacts, weapons, and teammates if you're looking for a certain framework to follow. Without further ado, let's get this guide rolling. Starting off with Yoimiya's artifacts, there really are just two main options that you want to consider. Although this may look like a simple choice on paper, it actually does get a little more complicated than just that. Depending on which artifact combination you choose, your DPS rotation will change slightly. So I'll do my best to explain these differences as this section progresses. For a quick rundown of the two combinations you want to consider on Yoimiya, the first set is the 4-set Shimenawa's Reminiscence. This set is really good and gives us the highest theoretical DPS at the price of energy management and concentrated damage into your normal attacks. The second set that you want to consider is the 2-set Crimson Witch of Flames plus the 2-set Gladiator / Shimenawa's Reminiscence. This set is a great generalist set for balanced overall damage. Also, this set is definitely a lot easier to use compared to the 4-set Shimenawa, but unfortunately you'll have to farm the Crimson Witch domain, which is a painful domain to farm. So now we know the two different artifact combinations that you want to choose from, but what's the big complication? Well, as we know, the 4-set Shimenawa drains 15 energy for the 4-piece buff, and this causes problems for Yoimiya if not managed correctly. Yoimiya's only form of AoE, albeit very small, comes from her Elemental Burst and its after effect. It's quite important to have the Aurora's Blaze mark on an enemy so your off-field damage dealers like Xingqiu, Fischl, Beidou, etc. can activate this mark for extra pyro damage during our 10-second window of pyro infusion. If you're running any set that's not the 4-set Shimenawa, you typically want to combo Q into E so you don't waste valuable time of your pyro infusion having to watch Yoimiya's burst animation. However, we simply can't do this with the 4-set Shimenawa's Reminiscence because if we do so, then we will have no energy to sacrifice for the 4-set effect, which plummets your DPS. Generally, instead of Q into E, now with the 4-set Shimenawa, you want to E, build up your energy with Pyro Infusion, then Q when you have it up. One nice thing about this rotation compared to the normal rotation is that when you use Q towards the tail end of Yoimiya's Pyro Infusion, we get more time to utilize her second Ascension talent, which provides an attack buff to the rest of the party for 15 seconds after using Q. Beyond that, there are other sets floating around as possible options for Yoimiya, but the only other combination that I really would recommend is the 4-set Crimson Witch of Flames. This set is strictly for the extra reaction damage, but even then, Yoimiya can't vaporize as consistently as other pyro units, so generally the 2 Crimson Witch plus the 2 Glad / Shimenawa is the better performer. I'll go a little more in depth about why this is the case later on in the video. The extra overload damage from the 4-set Crimson Witch is also nice for comps with Beidou, but it isn't really necessary either. As for artifact stats, Yoimiya runs the standard DPS build with attack percent in the Hourglass, pyro damage bonus in the Goblet, and crit rate or crit damage in the Circlet. Your artifact substat priority is crit rate, crit damage, attack percent, flat attack, energy recharge, and lastly Elemental Mastery. Unlike artifacts, Yoimiya actually has a ton more weapon options. Don't worry, I'm here to walk you through everything that works well on Yoimiya, from the best 5-star weapons all the way down to the easiest free-to-play options that you can obtain. Beginning with Yoimiya's best in slot, it is undoubtedly the Thundering Pulse. Boasting a whopping 66.2% crit damage, just like Staff of Homa, I can safely say that this bow is definitely on the higher end of 5-star weapons. The passive itself is a bit wonky to use compared to Homa, but nonetheless the bow was catered towards Yoimiya so she can use the passive quite nicely. Tied at number 2, we have the Scoured Harp and Amos bow. Depending on how your stats without the weapon looks, Scoured Harp could be better than Amos and vice versa. Both weapons have the capability of outdamaging the other, but it ultimately depends on your artifact stats. If I were to give a little piece of advice, I'd say most players should opt for Skyward over Amos just to have an easier time with farming artifacts for Yoimiya, since Amos does not actually provide any crit stats whatsoever. In the number 4 spot, we have Yoimiya's undisputed best 4-star bow, Rust. The comparison of these weapons are all at R1, but believe it or not, if you have an R3 or R4 Rust, you can even beat out the likes of R1 Skyward Harp and R1 Amos in terms of damage. Unfortunately, Rust shares the same issue as Amos, where you need to get higher quality artifacts for a great crit ratio, unlike Skyward Harp. Beyond Rust, the rest of the 4-star cast is really ambiguous in terms of what's better and what's worse. There are so many stipulations, passives, and your own artifact stats that have to be taken into account that it's really difficult to definitively say what's better. In terms of what's easy to use and easy to obtain, I definitely choose the Prototype Crescent, Blackcliff Warbow, and Slingshot. Assuming you have the passive up for all 3 of these weapons and the Slingshot is R5 because it's a 3-star weapon, these options serve as the best free-to-play options that all have pretty comparable damage. The next option I want to mention is the Viridescent Hunt. This weapon gives slightly less damage than the previous options that I mentioned, but for the most part you really can't go wrong with a crit rate weapon, especially one that only costs $10 with the Battle Pass. And lastly, before I move on, I know a lot of people are going to ask about the new Inazuma prototype Hamayumi. I personally hate this weapon on Yoimiya for 2 reasons. First things first, this bow has complete anti-synergy with the 4-piece Shimenawa's Reminiscence, which I know a lot of players are going to run on Yoimiya. Hamayumi wants you to sit on 100% energy for as long as possible, and Shimenawa wants to drain your energy for a buff to your attacks. Pairing the 2 together is just a complete mess. Second, even if you're not running the 4-set Shimenawa, having to sit on 100% energy until after your rotation on Yoimiya can become detrimental at times. Yoimiya's burst and enabling capabilities are a great pair with off-field damage dealers, and we really don't want to sacrifice this synergy. My final verdict would be to avoid this bow, but of course if you do abide by the passive of the weapon, the damage matches up quite well against other 4-star weapons. For those who have Rust, definitely use that over Hamayumi for the sake of consistency. Now that you know a little bit about how to build Yoimiya, let's talk about the different teammates that Yoimiya appreciates and what team possibilities they lead into. As you might know, Yoimiya excels in single target damage but has a complete lack of AoE damage unlike other pyro carries. After a lot of playing around with Yoimiya, it seems a lot of people, myself included, discovered a lot of promise with Beidou as a prime candidate to pair with Yoimiya. While Yoimiya is not quite the overload expert like Sniper Yanfei, Beidou's Elemental Burst is a great band-aid to Yoimiya's severe lack of crowd damage. Since we're running Beidou with Yoimiya as a fast main DPS/enabler, this might remind people of the Child Fireworks team, and that's exactly where I want to take things. The first team comp that I want to cover for Yoimiya is the classic Fireworks team. The team consists of Beidou, Fischl, Bennett, and Child, but this time we replace Child with Yoimiya. Fischl serves as an energy battery for Beidou, while Yoimiya serves as an enabler for Beidou's Elemental Burst, and even C6 Fischl if you happen to have that constellation. Bennett is the perfect fit for our last slot to provide heals, attack buffs, and finish off the Pyro Resonance with Yoimiya. Ultimately, the premise of the team is just to snapshot Oz and Beidou's Elemental Burst in Bennett's attack buff, and then go ham with Overload. Bennett and Beidou are pretty staple to this composition, but if you want a replacement for Fischl as a battery, then the Electro Traveler and Venti are possible substitutes. Nothing too complicated with this team composition. The second team composition that I want to cover is the Vapeload comp, which is very similar to the Fireworks team but with a single substitution. Instead of Beidou, we now have a team that consists of Xingqiu, Fischl, Bennett, and Yoimiya. For those who don't know what Vapeload/Supervape is, a dumbed down explanation goes something like this. When we create an electrocharge reaction, the Hydro Aura and Electro Aura still persists on the enemy. So with Fischl and Xingqiu, we can consistently have the Hydro and Electro Auras on the enemy, and then combine the 2 elements with Yoimiya's Pyro to create a whole ton of damage through reactions. The only downside here is that this team comp is pure single target DPS since we're running Yoimiya, Fischl, and Xingqiu, who all lack AoE for the most part. I wouldn't recommend running Beto in place of Fischl here, since without a battery, Beto will most definitely struggle to keep her burst ready off cooldown. And lastly, the third team composition that I want to cover is the Mono-Pyro team comp. As the name implies, we're just going to run multiple Pyro units and support them with Resistance Shred from Anemo units or Zhongli. The team comp consists of Yoimiya, Bennett, and then a Pyro sub DPS / burst support plus Zhongli or an Anemo unit with the 4-set Viridescent. Bennett is crucial to this team because, like Geo or Anemo, when we're running a Mono-Pyro comp, we can't create our own melt or vaporize reactions. So the importance of Bennett's attack buff increases by tenfold. For the third Pyro unit, there are a variety of choices depending on your character collection and their constellations. However, the number one option to pick for this slot for most players is definitely Xiangling. She's a super easy unit to use and she's very accessible to everyone. Some of my other personal favorites that are a little harder to obtain are the C4 Yanfei with Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers and C2 Klee for the defense reduction on her elemental skill. And for the last unit, Zhongli is a no-brainer because of his shield and his resistance shred. Kazuha's ability to increase elemental damage and utilize the 4-set Viridescent is also a no-brainer just like Zhongli. These two units are undoubtedly your best options for the Mono-Pyro playstyle. Other options for the last slot include Sucrose with the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers, Venti, or the Anemo MC. If you wanted to, even Sayu or Jean for more heals could fit in the last slot as long as you're running the 4-set Viridescent on them. Shifting gears a little bit, let me talk about whether or not Yoimiya works in a normal Vaporize team comp, since I have gotten a few questions about that. The short answer to this question is yes, I'm sure you could whip up a normal Vaporize team for Yoimiya with the help of strong supports like Xingqiu and Zhongli. The longer answer based on my brief Yoimiya experience is to look into the Vapeload / Supervape comp rather than just a classic Vaporize comp. The reason I say this is because Yoimiya's internal cooldowns on both her burst and her normal attacks are long, as I mentioned before. More often than not, you're going to vaporize the first hit of Yoimiya's attack chain, which hits twice, meaning you're vaporizing on a hit that has a natural low multiplier. After that, you'll notice that Yoimiya can't even vaporize every attack if you watch her attack chain in slow motion. Due to internal cooldowns, aka the rate at which Yoimiya can apply the Pyro Aura with her attacks, she's limited to only vaporizing on her 3rd and 5th attack after vaporizing the 1st. Not to mention, you will not have a consistent vaporize on the 3rd and 5th attacks all the time because of other variables like the 3-hit rule of internal cooldowns, as well as dodging and moving around, which interrupts your full attack chain sometimes. It would take ages to explain everything, but the bottom line is that Yoimiya will always get vaporized hits off with a unit like Xingqiu, but sometimes you'll be vaporizing the smaller hits as opposed to her attacks with the larger multipliers. Not to say that this is the worst case scenario, but again, I do think that combining Fischl with Xingqiu is a really good way to bolster Yoimiya's single target damage without having to completely give up on Xingqiu as a teammate for Yoimiya. That's pretty much everything I wanted to cover for the guide portion of the video, so now I'll quickly show my Yoimiya build in case anyone wanted an example build or if anyone was just curious about my stats. For her basic attack, you can take a look at that right here, as well as her elemental mastery. And if we go deeper into the stats, we can take a look at her crit rate, crit damage, energy recharge, and pyro damage bonus. For my Yoimiya's weapon, I'm running an R1 Skyward Harp, and as for her artifacts, I have the 2-set Shimenawa with the 2-set Crimson Witch of Flames. For the substats on my artifacts, this is the Flower, the Feather, the Hourglass, the Goblet, and lastly the Headpiece. For her constellations, I have C2 Yoimiya, and as for her talents, they are 10, 8, and 8. If you're curious about talent priority, you should get your normal attack as high as it can go first, and then after that, I'd recommend getting your elemental burst and elemental skill to level 6 or 8. Anything beyond that is just the cherry on top, because believe it or not, your E actually doesn't have that great scaling compared to your normal attack. And with that, it's time to wrap up the video. Hopefully you found this one enjoyable or got something useful out of it. If you did, be sure to support both the video and the channel. A big thanks to everyone who tuned in to my YouTube livestream for some Yoimiya pools, and I hope to see you all for another chill stream on Twitch in a few days. Other than that, look forward to a Sayu build guide coming soon, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.